If you pitch this idea to a film company, it's likely they'd tell you the story is too unrealistic. Until July this year, most of us had never heard the name before. She was a Wimbledon wildcard just after finishing her A-levels, and then just over 2 months later, she's won the US Open women's singles title.
One of the most dramatic stories ever in sport. A qualifier winning a Grand Slam.
Absolutely brilliant. I can't quite believe what I was seeing. Emma Raducanu, now the new US Open champion.
For it just to happen so quickly over months, where's her experience come from? Really, I mean, I think that's what we're all asking ourselves. How is this even possible?
She's been mentally stronger than Zachary, than Shelby Rogers, than all of her opponents. She is living the dream. Just look at those.
I'm really jealous because I want to be just like her and a really good famous player.
On Saturday night, people around the world watched Emma Raducanu do something that everyone from royalty to the Spice Girls agreed was incredible. But who is this 18-year-old woman? How did she become an overnight sporting superstar? And what does the future hold for her?
Yeah, I've got no idea what's going on really, outside of Arthur Ashe, outside of our hotel.
Welcome to the Sky News Daily Podcast with me, Dermot Murnaghan. Well, Martha, you know the drill. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, I'm Martha Kellner. I'm the US correspondent for Sky News, and I've been covering Emma Raducanu's run at the US Open this week. I think Emma Raducanu might have had a couple. Emma Raducanu has just won the first set. First blood to the Briton. What an incredible start.
Let's talk about the remarkable, and that's not a strong enough word, Emma Raducanu then. Can we define her style of tennis beyond the power, accuracy and inordinate amounts of skill?
Yeah, I think because this is only Emma Raducanu's fourth ever professional tour level event, it's only her second ever Grand Slam, that as much as sort of tennis fans and her opponents have been working her out, she's been working out her own game as well. I know earlier in the tournament, she was talking about just how surprised she'd been at some of the shots she was able to hit. She'd been surprised at how she was able to move around the court, almost shaking her head in disbelief at times at just how talented she is. And I think in sort of direct answer to your question, she has a very complete game. She looks like she wouldn't be that powerful. She's got these long, slender limbs. And in fact, sat opposite her the other night when I was interviewing her, I was struck by just how tiny she is. But on the court, she has this almost sort of balletic power. She's very strong. She actually works very hard in the gym. One of the other British players, Heather Watson, was talking about how she lifts weights that bodybuilders would be envious of. I think that is what's so surprising about her, given her frame. But in terms of the main weapons that she has, she's quickly become known as one of the best returners in the women's game. She hits her return very early, she's very aggressive, and as a result that puts a lot of pressure on her opponents, and consequently that's why she's managed to draw double faults from opponents throughout her run here in New York at Flushing Meadows. It also allows her to recover from poor starts. There's been a couple of occasions where she's gone a breakdown very early on in her matches. That happened against Shelby Rogers in the round of 16. It also happened against Belinda Bencic in the quarterfinals. But because her return of serve is so strong, she's been able to bounce back from those moments by breaking back immediately. I think also her serve, which has previously been a concern, has been very solid here. It's getting better, and she's also been very bold with her serve. We saw that in the third championship point, the point that she was eventually able to convert to become the US Open champion, and she won that with an ace, a serve she'd never tried before. Her backhand's her other big weapon. That's really damaged the women stood across the net from her throughout this astonishing run.
And what did you make then of the final? I mean, just the manner and style in which she won and maintained that record throughout the tournament of never dropping a set.
Yeah, I mean, it really has been astonishing. I was speaking to quite a few of the sort of the tennis journalists who go around the world following the tennis tour, who I know from my time working back in newspapers, and they were quite literally dumbfounded by Emma Raducanu throughout this tournament. I think at some point people have been waiting for the nerves to strike, for her to tense up, for an opponent to just work out her game and get the better of her, but it never happened. She's come through this tournament, she's played 10 games here in New York, 3 in qualifying, 7 in the main draw, the first ever qualifier to reach a Grand Slam final, men's or women's, and she wins that match in straight sets. She comes through the entire tournament without losing a single set. It has been something to behold, and I think with the final she was up against Leylah Fernandez, a fellow teenager. She's only turned 19 last week, so very young, very similar in age, and in fact they were actually born just a few hundred miles apart in Canada, just a couple of months apart. And so I think everyone was very excited to see what we're imagining as a display of the future of women's tennis, and it very much lived up to the billing, particularly in that first set. They both threw everything they had at this match. They seemed completely nerveless out there.
Would you explain, I was just thinking about you right before you stepped out onto the court, like what you must have felt like. Were your nerves out of control or were you calm?
I think before the match there were a little bit of pre-match nerves in terms of something just didn't feel quite 100% and I couldn't quite put my finger on it. It's just a weird feeling, but I think that's as part of the build-up and everything. But as soon as I got out onto court and was just doing what I've done 100 times before, playing and just focusing on the point and tactics and not trying to get caught up in anything, the occasion, I felt completely normal, and it was a great level match because Leylah played incredible tennis and we were literally throwing everything at each other. And I'm just very proud to have come through some tough moments at the end especially.
Let's get into the background then. So she was born in Toronto, a Romanian father and a Chinese mother.
Yeah, they both work in finance. She's talked about how demanding they are. She says she had a very tough upbringing in the sense that she said that had helped her on the court with her resilience.
They're my toughest and biggest critics, and to have them, say they're proud and happy, it just means absolutely everything. And yeah, when I was out there, I definitely wanted to do it for them as well as me.
They're very private people. When she had her run to the 4th round of Wimbledon, they didn't actually sit in the players' box. They sat in amongst the crowd so not to gain too much attention from the press and the media at Wimbledon. So very private but very driven. Her dad has taken a very keen interest in her tennis career. There was a rumour, a bit of a myth if you like, on the junior tennis tour that her dad had asked for her to have a specific coach for each of her shots in tennis, a little bit like you might have in golf. But actually some of the people I've been speaking to have said they're not sure that that's necessarily true. They've certainly not heard it out of Ian's mouth himself, but he definitely does take a keen interest in her daughter's career. Mark Petchey, who's coached Emma Raducanu in the past, said that the dad does ask questions about what's best for his daughter, about coaching philosophies, and he's very knowledgeable about tennis as well, in the same way that, for instance, Serena and Venus Williams' dad Richard takes a very keen interest in his children's tennis life, in the same way that Judy Murray has played an instrumental role in Andy Murray's tennis life. Clearly they had a huge interest in tennis. They first took her to her tennis club as a toddler. She started playing tennis properly at the age of 5, and I think her talent was obviously very evident early on, and in fact when she was 13 in 2015 she became one of the youngest players ever to win an International Tennis Federation under-18 event. So I don't think anyone expected her perhaps to rise to the top this quickly, but she was certainly earmarked for success by junior coaches.
And just continuing, I suppose, the journey, I mean, given she's a natural athlete, quite clearly, you've got to imagine she was pretty good at loads of sports and hobbies as she was growing up.
Yeah, and I think she still is. She still plays golf to a very high level. She's very fast. She's very athletic. She's spoken in the past about going to dancing clubs. And I think one of the key things of her story is that it's a lesson in not focusing on one particular thing too soon. Her mum, Renee, also wanted her to continue in education. She's the one who's been saying you need to do your exams, you can't focus on tennis too soon. And I think that's paid dividends, because this intelligence that she has off the court, she got an A star in her economics A level, an A in her maths A level. And I think that intelligence off the court has also transferred on the court. She's able to work out her opponents very adeptly. She's also able to retain information. One of the pieces I was reading about Emma Raducanu noted the fact that sometimes with young players you coach them a skill, and then by the time you work on it with them in the next session, they've forgotten that skill, whereas she's able to retain that information. And I think it is a lesson in not focusing on one particular thing too soon.
I mean, it is just so astonishing, isn't it? These last few months. Let's just concentrate on those. Someone just posted a picture on Twitter I saw of her playing in one of those Wimbledon warm-ups, the Nottingham Open back in June. There was no one there. I mean, it was a virtually empty court in terms of spectators, and then here we are a few months later. She's won the US Open, but you know that it was a very important time then. Those 2 weeks or the 10 days she had at Wimbledon. Did you pay any attention? I mean, because I know you follow these things deeply. Did you pay any attention when she was awarded that wild card to play there?
I'd heard the name Emma Raducanu for the first time maybe a few years ago. When you ask people, are there young prospects up and coming, particularly as in the British game we have been starved of genuine Grand Slam contenders beyond Andy Murray for years now, so you wonder whether there's anyone coming through. And I remember back probably about 5 years ago, I was at a women's Fed Cup tournament in Eilat in Israel, and Judy Murray was coaching the women's team at the time, and she mentioned the name Emma Raducanu to me. I then didn't think about the name Emma Raducanu for about 4 years until I saw that she'd been awarded this wild card to Wimbledon. Wild cards are given to young British players often in order to give them some experience of playing against real top players. But obviously, we didn't expect her to even get to necessarily the second, third round of Wimbledon. She ended up making the fourth round.
There's a real buzz around here about her next match. It's against the world number 75, Australia's Alia Tomljanovic, and it is winnable. As she was leaving to join the player bubble a couple of weeks ago, her parents suggested she was packing too many match outfits. As it turns out, she didn't pack enough.
At that point, there was a real buzz about her because of what we could see in her game, because we could see just how talented she was, and the fact that she had been able to transfer her success on the junior tour to the main tour level events, playing against the best players in the world. And I think the fact that we didn't see her that much because she was focusing on her studies, her A-levels, and also because of the COVID pandemic, that's what has made this really seem like it's come out of nowhere. Playing in only her fourth ever tour level event, only her second ever Grand Slam. It really is the stuff of fairy tales. You can't imagine particularly how her parents watching her back home must have been feeling, not able to be there with her in person, but just thinking, that's my kid doing something that nobody has ever done before. We've seen teenage champions in tennis, although not that many in recent years. We have seen teenage champions, but never has anyone done it in only their second ever Grand Slam. It is the stuff of dreams.
to Wimbledon now, and in the end, the dreams of Britain's new tennis star were cruelly dashed as Emma Raducanu was forced to withdraw.
She was a set down to Australia's Ajla Tomljanovic and 3-love down in the second set when the medics were called.
Emma Raducanu's dream of a quarter-final at Wimbledon ending in the most heartbreaking fashion. This is a devastating blow for Emma Raducanu and for a nation rooting for a young new star. A sad and disappointing outcome.
And just on that fourth round match at Wimbledon, when she went out with those breathing difficulties, I remember, the tennis commentators at the time more or less saying, well, whatever caused them, it kind of shows that she's a prospect for the future, just not quite ready yet. Perhaps it was the pressure getting to her there. And that makes, this US Open perhaps even more astonishing, that she had been marked down as, yes, a stellar talent, but not quite there yet.
Yeah, she stepped away from that match. It seemed like she was hyperventilating or possibly had stomach cramps. She then disappeared into the locker room, people wondering whether she was going to come back out again. Her team then said that she'd withdrawn with breathing problems, and I think the natural conclusion was that it had been some mental health problem, that perhaps it was anxiety, she was having a panic attack. They now say it was a physical problem. We don't know the exact reason. She perhaps doesn't even know the exact reason for why she wasn't able to continue in that match, but it is an even more astonishing facet of this story that she was able to bounce back so quickly. She appeared on TV just shortly after she withdrew from that fourth round match, and I was impressed with just how composed she was on that occasion. And she's spoken to the media after, I can't remember what, but she spoke to the media after one of her matches here at Flushing Meadows, and she said that the experience of Wimbledon had doubtless helped her cope with the occasion here. I don't know whether it perhaps helps as well that she's been away from the pressures of having a home crowd in Wimbledon, and they've created this sort of bubble around her here. She's spoken about existing in this very tiny world over the past 16 days that includes the Flushing Meadows tennis camp, her hotel in Manhattan, and what is a relatively modest support team that she's got here, her coach, her physio, her agent, and not really much else. She's not been checking her phone, and I think she's managed to just isolate herself from the buzz back home.
And is it just the buzz back home, or has the United States taken Emma Raducanu to their hearts?
Yeah, I think they have. I think Americans love a good sports story. They love the story of the underdog, but most of all, they love the story of a winner. And just in the days following Emma Raducanu's victory here at Flushing Meadows, she's appeared on, the biggest American TV shows. She's been walking around the streets of New York, taking her picture with a billboard with her face on it, and I think she does have the potential to be an international superstar. It's important we don't get carried away just yet. This is her first Grand Slam. We've had flash in the pan female Grand Slam champions before, although the completeness of Emma Raducanu's game does mark her out from the masses. And I think what will be interesting to see is just how her team handle this overnight almost success. She's going to have advertisers queuing up to work with her, sponsors queuing up to work with her, and something Ian Bates, the head of the Lawn Tennis Association, I was speaking to him in the hours after Emma Raducanu's victory here, and he said we do need to protect her from that. Her whole life has changed overnight. She was at one point straddling two lives. 2 months ago, she was attending her sixth form prom at a golf club in Bromley. 8 weeks later, she was holding the US Open trophy in front of the world's media to this international adoration. And I think he was aware that there needs to be some protections put in place fairly swiftly to ensure that Emma Raducanu is able to cope with this level of attention and success and the fame and fortune that it brings.
Coming up, money, sponsorship and the future of Emma Raducanu. I've been seeing figures like $1 billion bandied around in terms of lifetime earnings. I mean, that's getting a bit ahead of itself, isn't it?
Yeah, I saw that $1 billion figure bandied around as well in one of the newspapers. I think, quite frankly, that is a ludicrous prediction to be making at this stage, as I say, of a woman who has only won one Grand Slam and is still 18 years old. The only sports stars that have ever reached anywhere near that level of financial success are Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods. That is it. No tennis player has ever made $1 billion, not even Roger Federer, Novak Djokovic, with all their on-court success and their off-court marketability. But there's no doubt about it, you know, people are queuing up now to work with Emma Raducanu. Some sponsors very smartly got on board in the wake of that run to the fourth round of Wimbledon. There'll be many more wanting to get involved now. Her agent out here is a 29-year-old guy who clearly very intelligently, very smartly worked out that Emma Raducanu was a future prospect. He wouldn't have ever imagined that he'd be managing a US Open champion so soon into her career. He presumably can't believe how lucky he is, because obviously her success becomes his success as well. I think, again, what will be interesting to see is who they pick to team up with. You know, if they just pick a few select sponsors to work with, or whether they go all in and take every opportunity now to capitalise on this moment. Because as we speak, this may be the only Grand Slam that Emma Raducanu ever wins. They will hope that this is just the start of a very long career. She could still have 2 decades left in this sport.
Those words may come back to haunt you, Martha. I know it's not a prediction. You say that may be the only one she wins, but you know, after number 6 or something like that, you know, which could be in a couple of years' time.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody knows. She could be the biggest star in tennis. I think probably the fact that she is so talented means that she will win more Grand Slams, but anything can happen. You know, injuries, God forbid, could happen. Mental health could intervene. Anything could happen. And that's why I think we'll be watching closely what the team decide to do with her in the next few months.
And what about, just lastly, in terms of rankings? I know they matter to the players. Presumably she's instantly installed as the British number 1. I mean, she was in the hundreds on the world rankings. This should bump her up quite a lot. Yeah,
the rankings have just come out. To give you some perspective of how rapid the rise of Emma Raducanu has been, when she was given that wild card into Wimbledon 2 and a bit months ago, she was ranked 338 in the world. She's now ranked 23 in the world. There's never been a rise so quick across the whole of sport. It really is remarkable. But just on a very basic level, that ranking now means that she has access to the biggest tournaments in the world, to play the best players in the world on a routine basis, and that's incredibly important. It means she doesn't have to bother with coming through qualifying. It also means she's seeded, so the start of those tournaments are in theory easier for her. It also means her newfound success, she'll be given invitations to play at different events. She may choose to either remain in the US or come back to the US and play in tournaments like Chicago and Indian Wells, which is at the start of October, which is just about the highest profile tennis event outside the 4 major Grand Slams.
And of course, that rise up the rankings as you described there, Martha, and then playing all the top players by right. That's incredibly exciting for the tennis fans, for the huge audiences that will want to watch her play.
Yeah, I think that's the most exciting thing about it, is that you had the occasion for the final on Saturday evening where entire families were crowded around their TVs watching a woman play tennis. The idea that that would have happened, at the start of the tournament 2 weeks ago was unthinkable. And now everyone just wants to know, the whole world wants to know, what's next for Emma Raducanu, what's next for this prodigious talent. And I hope that what we see is her able to sustain this into future tournaments, that the weight of expectation is not too much for her, because we have seen in the past, in recent years particularly, female Grand Slam champions who fade away after that first victory, who aren't able to reach those heights again. And there's a lot of flux, a lot of change in the women's game. There's not a lot of consistency beyond the likes of Serena Williams. For instance, we had Naomi Osaka, clearly one of the best female tennis players of all time, who's hugely marketable, who became an international superstar and has struggled so much with her mental health over the past 12 months, and that's really interrupted her run. And the team again around Emma Raducanu will want to guard against that, the occasion, the attention interfering with what is an incredible talent.
My thanks to Martha Kellner. This episode of the Sky News Daily Podcast was presented by me, Dermot Murnaghan, and produced by Nicola Ayres, with media research by Simon Windsor and Rob Fellows. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back tomorrow.